All right, so we did get to see Dom earlier take down, I believe it was Rhinos. Dom beat Rhinos in a not so particularly close game. Uh, Game number 3 here. We'll see what the opening hands look like. Rakdos Scam is our champion's deck of choice for the weekend. And, it honestly really goes to show, like, just how powerful of a mage Dom is. This weekend he's playing Rakdos Scam, but then before he had been winning RCQs with Amulet and the new Mycosynth Gardens. And to set the pace, to set the ambiance for our round here, we've got a turn 1 Ragavan off Spire Bluff Canal. That can only mean one thing.
Absolutely. Well, it can mean a few things. Could be a bunch of different decks, but more than likely, Murktide Gaming here. Yeah, the deck ends up being awesome. And I believe these two players are 2-0. I could be wrong. Okay.
Got it. Wonderful. Yeah, I was gonna say like a fun time. That was my answer, but yeah, I will also accept archetypes as submissions as well. That is cool by me.
Yeah, 100%. And it does look like we are Murktiding here. We'll see if we can get that hand cam up. But
Okay,
yeah,
so
pretty traditional stuff here. This version does actually have, wow, this is a little crazy. It is 2 Murktides and 2 Underworld Breach in this list instead of just 3 Murktide, which is kind of the traditional list outside of that.
how do you feel about that?
It's interesting. I mean, it's I would say a little bit of the cowardice way out, saying like I'm not sure which is better. I'm gonna just play both. But you know what? There's going to be situations where Breach is amazing, and there's going to be situations where Murktide is better. And I think it's interesting to just be able to do both avenues.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing your write up on that. Which one is better here? I'm surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to see Murktide just not be good, but we'll find that out in due time. Most notably, the double fatal push going to take care of Ragavan and Ledger Shredder here. So really, Dom focusing on stymieing the aggression here from the Murktide side of things. And one thing that I noticed, I believe Dom is also on a mulligan to 6. So this game I would expect to be a long, potentially uphill battle from the Rakdos side.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets to be pretty tough here from Rakdos. But, I believe we did see this match already take place once. And, so far we just haven't seen Murktide win at all. So would be, would still be the first to take it down in our feature match area, at least. Of course, these players are 2-0, so they are winning already.
All right, Dom's hand is pretty stacked here. Seasoned Pyromancer, Dothi Voidwalker, Bloodstained Mire, Grief, and a copy of Takenuma, the Abandoned Mire. Now that is a pretty sweet card. Made itself into the deck as a one of, I would imagine, to buy back elementals and things like that.
Yeah, and we got Seasoned Pyromancer now to be able to pitch some stuff. I imagine that's what we're going to see. Just a tricky card for these Murktide decks to deal with. Any deck that's trying to have a bunch of spot removal to deal with threats, to have to point removal spells at these 1/1s at some point, if you're not just flying over with different Murktide draws, it ends up being pretty strong.
Okay, well, like Dothi Voidwalker and Takenuma both going to get discarded here to the Seasoned Pyromancer, replaced by Undying Malice and a copy of Bloodstained Mire. So, game moves forward here. I have a question, Corey. How exactly does Rakdos Scam deal with the premier threat in the Murktide list, which is the namesake Murktide Regent?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just like Terminate. If you have to pair together, some removal spells of like Fury plus Malice, you can get that going. But Terminate being the traditional way that we would see sided into that, sided up to 2-3 copies. I know whenever I play any kind of like Death Shadow list or anything like that, Terminate is something I'm always ready to go. And it sucks because Terminate is not that good of a card here in Modern. 2-mana removal spell to deal with stuff is a little above rate than we normally have to deal with, or than you normally want in Modern. But Murktide just being able to be a 7/7 or 8/8, Unholy Heat, the normal traditional removal spell you want, just isn't enough out of these red decks.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, right? Because I was thinking, like, when I used to play Modern like 5, 6, 7 years ago, one card that was very popular was Abrupt Decay, and now it's like I don't even know where to look to find even a single copy in all these deck lists that I'm going through.
Yeah, absolutely. Abrupt Decay just does not seem like a playable magic card anymore. When there's 2 mana cards that are really big threats you want to deal with, sure, but when your 2 mana removal spell does not hit a technically 7 mana card, that ends up being really brutal.
All right. Well, Dragon's Rage channel going to come into the red zone, drop Dom down to 14 life, following up with a second one here. So that is the double Dragon's Rage channeler combo. And looks like, okay, Swamp going to be played. We're hard casting a Grief here, just saying, hey, what's in your hand? And we might actually get a sneak peek of this, what's going on.
Yeah, we'll be able to see the hand a little bit here, at least for a second. Once again, hand cams are just dictated on if the players have them themselves. So maybe we can message this person to try to get them on it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, decides to just scoop it up when you see
Yeah,
the hand. Just the flyers being too much for Dom to handle here.
exactly. And yeah, we'll dive into Dom's deck list momentarily here. You can see it's got the stock list for the most part. A lot of key elements: Fury, Grief. You have the Undying effects in Malakir Rebirth, Undying Malice, Feign Death as well, and then a couple other. I would call them like anti-meta elements, like Blood Moon and then Dothy Voidwalker. Let's talk about the sideboard, though. Is there anything in the sideboard that you are interested in, Corey? Because earlier we looked at this and you mentioned some highlight cards like engineered explosives and things like that.
Yeah, Unlicensed Hearse is probably my favorite card against Murktide, being able to shut off the delirium of DRC as well as control Murktide. That ends up being quite strong. I'd probably bring in Thoughtseize as well, another card to deal with Murktide. And we do see that Dom has those 3 Terminates just in the main deck, just recognizing Murktide's going to be the most played deck. I think everyone could see that coming. So main decking that's usually some of the cards that you're bringing in if you're not playing all of them. So Dom almost pre-boarded here. I'd be interested to see if we see Leyline of the Void, maybe instead of Blood Moons. Like, when Murktides have Blood Moons in their sideboard, usually that's not a card you want to bring in against them because they're pretty prepared for it. So
Yeah.
I'll be interested about Leyline, but otherwise, for sure, the Hearses.
Let me ask you a really tricky question. How do you feel about a card like Knight's Whisper in this matchup?
I think that's just a fine card that you can play when you're on the play, but I think when you're on the draw, Knight's Whisper ends up just not being good enough.
Okay, yeah. I mean, we sort of saw what happened in this first game where it was like turn 1 creature, turn 2 creature, turn 3 creature, and you know falling behind, like being on the back pedal when that sort of onslaught is right in front of you in your face. It's almost like a recipe for disaster. I think I'd agree there. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Absolutely. So we'll be heading right back into the match here. Murktide, pretty standard sideboard here. Looking at the Kovu's list, and we see 3 engineered explosives, 1 spell snare, 1 spell pierce, 2 hearses. We got dress down, blood moons, disputes, and furies. Nothing really that excites me in this matchup, to be honest. Rakdos scam. One of those things is you just kind of just want to max out on your removal spell to stop these kind of scammy draws of Fraying Death and Undying Malice. Outside of that, that you really don't have a great plan against these decks. So maybe we're going to see the Furies come in as another kind of free answer to deal with it. But outside of that, I would imagine not too many changes.
All right. Well, we're back into the match here for game number 2. I believe Murktide is up 1-0, having won with a pair of Flying Dragon's Rage Chandler. So we're going to use our special hand cam features here to find out what Dom's opening hand is going to be. And it looks like a copy of Polluted Delta Swamp, Black Cleave Cliffs, Ragavan, Knight's Whisper, and then Undying Malice. So this is a reasonable hand by my metrics, but again, I don't really play these kind of decks. What do you think, Corey?
No, I think this hand looks great, and I do think the one thing it was Kovu that won the first game, so Dom is down a game, not up a game. We'll fix that graphic here for you, but this should be Dom going first, unless I was mistaken.
Yeah, and we can see it on the indicator. Turn 1 goes to Capricioso. So yeah, I think overall this is whenever you have Ragavan in your opening hand, so long as the rest of the hand is like reasonable, I would just put my opponent to the test all the time, every time.
Yeah, make them have it here. I totally agree. It's a little different with these scam decks because you do have protection for your cards a lot, but then you have to start working into the equation that they could have a second removal spell. They could have a spell pierce, maybe probably a card you take out, but I'm the same. I'm jamming Ragavan here every time.
Yeah, and I think also with having these 2 mana spells in our hand, the Night's Whisper and potentially the Terminate on turn 2, like we just have so much to do with our mana that playing cute not really the optimal line here, right? This is a kind of interesting
Totally agree.
concept, but I've always felt like in most games, technical proficiency is always the number one thing. Like in poker, for example, right? Like you play to the math, you play to the odds more than anything else, and then
Yep.
bluffing is something that comes up, but it's never like your primary focus. Same thing here, right?
100%. Totally agree with you here. Interesting to play the bobble beforehand there. That would lead me to believe that Kavu has a fetch land as well, and thinking, okay, do I want to check the top of my deck? Maybe really needing a specific thing instead of the normal play of, well, play DRC and then play a bunch of bobbles, as you see 3 bobbles here. Pretty much a new hand already.
All right. Well, Terminate going to take care of this Dragon's Rage Channeler means Ragavan has clear access to the life total, going to generate a treasure token, and we'll see what this Pilferer is going to nab.
Yeah, and there was another example of learning when to just play Ragavan and when to not. And if Ragavan didn't get cast turn 1, you can't dash into a creature. But if your opponent does have this creature draw, then that's perfect. You have a removal spell to get through, and now you have Undying Malice. Now you have Feign Death to be able to protect Ragavan. So that worked out very well for Dom.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, if I'm in Dom's seat right now, what kind of signals are you picking up? I mean, my Ragavan didn't die on turn 1. If you're in that position, do you just assume that maybe your opponent doesn't have the removal spell?
Not in this scenario. With 3 baubles, you are almost forced to play DRC to get all those surveils, especially when you might have some breaches. You might have just Murktide in your deck, where most of the time you just want to mill cards off the top of your library over and over until you fill it up there. So, no, I wouldn't take anything too much from that this time. But normally, yes, that is something to think. Like, you probably don't have a removal spell. Otherwise, you want to deal with Ragavan.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is where something like Feign Death or Undying Malice will probably be they're sitting in that blowout potential, but it looks like instead of actually casting removal spells here, we are going to just deploy more creatures that can block Ragavan, and I mean that's good enough for now.
Unlicensed hurt at the top. And yeah, you see Malices, you see Night's Whisper, which we're probably going to start with, but no ways to deal with both these creatures yet. Something like a Fury and a red card, though, that would have been excellent.
Oh wow, check this out. Grief off the top here.
Oh,
That is an
yeah.
excellent draw.
Oh, yeah, that is awesome.
Now, Kovu does only have 3 cards in the hand, which means this Grief combined with the Feign Death is going to, basically take the 2 best cards here. I wouldn't be surprised if there were maybe like multiple lands or something like that in the hand here, but oh wow, check it out. Shredder Island,
Okay.
and
Takes a Shredder, probably taking another Shredder here. Both cards gone, and only an island left. So yeah, Grief off the top was excellent.
now that's not to say that this game is over for Kovu. I mean, the board set doesn't look particularly exciting. You've got no hand. Your opponent is outpowering you. But something like a Murktide region off the top could just be... Actually, that's not even true. Looks like Murktide not so good here because of the graveyard seems to be 3 baubles, 1 Dragon's Rage
Yeah,
Channeler, and
it
2
will not
Shredders.
be gaining any more power, that's for sure.
What's also interesting is maybe, I mean, this is there was a decision on Dom's turn whether you play the unlicensed first or whether you do something like Night's Whisper. Obviously, the Night's Whisper worked out very well given that there was a Grief looming somewhere near the top of the deck. But maybe if the graveyard had a couple more instants and or sorceries, we would have seen Dom just play the unlicensed first instead and try things out that way.
Yeah, but yeah, getting that Grief down is definitely what you want to be starting with here.
Okay, that's a good draw. I will say the sequencing there was rather interesting. Playing the island first means you can't quite take a land off of expressive iteration. What would be the reason to do that?
God, it is tough here. I mean, maybe another expressive iteration on the top that you're looking to keep here. You definitely want whatever card is on top. You know, maybe a removal spell for grief. Unlikely just another iteration what you want to be keeping on top. Pretty much always ends up being the best card.
Yeah, that's how you know the card is like just inherently like eyebrow raising because I can't think of a scenario where expressive iteration is ever really that bad. I mean, unless the game is like literally over and you top deck it, but at that point, like it's probably the best card to top deck because it could get you out of those kind of situations. So even at the worst scenarios, it is still the best. Like that's a kind of absurd.
Yeah, 100%. 2 mana, draw 2 cards, and have a little bit of card, selection ends up being excellent.
Okay, well, the fact that Kovu is thinking about this might indicate that we actually have a lot of decision points here. So that means the game could just be close, and I mean, all it takes is something like a lightning bolt, for example, right? To or even an unholy heat, because we will get delirium once the sorcery goes to the graveyard.
And there's another Fang Death, though, to be able to protect whatever gets dealt with. So, pretty good stuff regardless here to protect from Dom's side. But yeah, this must be a thinker here with these top 3 cards.
Okay. So we did get word from the producer, any Bob the Dog Hall of Famer Pro Tour champion Gabriel Nassif fans out there. Unfortunately, he has lost round number 3 to Demir Mill, which is a deck that we talked about earlier. I'd love to see that in the booth at some point in time this weekend too, just to see maybe what some of the new cards are from Phyrexia. But going into the game here, it looks like, okay, we do have Lightning Bolt here, and that is going to target one of the 2 creatures.
All right, let's see which one it is being targeted.
Now, what's really interesting is the way that Feign Death works. It doesn't give the creature undying, right? It actually just brings the creature back. So even though the grief does have a counter on it, it could just come back because it's not checking to see if it already has a counter like undying would normally make you do.
Absolutely. But putting this into play tap does allow Ragavan at least gets to connect here. And now we're just off to a race. And if Kovu were to hit anything off Ragavan's, this could kind of blow this game wide open.
It's funny because I feel like most of the time when you see the combo in air quotes go off, like grief plus Feign Death or Undying Malice or whatever it might be, it seems like those games should just never even be remotely close. And it's not always like that. It looks like a Feign Death is exiled by the Ragavan.
Yeah, probably not casting that one off the treasure. It is castable, so that is an option, but
All right, 1 card left in the hand here for Kovu. So, oh wow, wait, pain cost. Oh, Lightning Bolt. Okay, all right.
Bolt to just deal with something straight away. And wow, Kovu's expressive iteration here was excellent. Just 2 removal spells and some 3rd mystery card, but hitting 2 bolts off that was incredible. Now
I mean,
definitely
beyond excellent.
Yeah. And now this grief like pretty much has to stay back. Unlicensed Hearst is able to check Channeler, but one of the plays that you can do here is make the DRC attack and then just block with grief. Or you just try to race it. I like this play of just forcing it into combat and then dealing with it.
Yeah, this is actually super awesome, and I think good patience on Dom for holding the unlicensed first. I mean, maybe a little bit of luck or just like sequencing like Night's Whisper beforehand, not doing deploying this card earlier because now this is a forced exchange that is very profitable for the Rakdos scam side of things. Now, that being said, I'm not going to count out the Murktide player because there are still some pretty good top decks that could save you from this position. Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Yeah, plenty of good draws. Are you saying from our Murktide player, right?
Yeah, how do we get out of this situation?
Yeah, just another bolt ends up being pretty strong, probably the best draw, but once again, just more expressive iterations, probably the ideal thing.
Yeah, that's another good. I was thinking if we top deck like Murktide Regent here right now, we can exile some of the extra card types from our graveyard to prevent the Dragon's Rage channel from having to attack. Basically, there's like a number of things that you could do here, and it's just a matter of how kind the top of the deck is here.
Yeah, absolutely. Expressive iteration, still the best card. I feel like we're going to be saying that all weekend. Be like, just that's all we need at the top. Let's see what we draw. Another thinker here, but of course, this is a big moment. Both these players are 2-0.
All right, we're in combat, no way around it. So Ragavan also comes into the red zone here. What's your play? I think I know what I would like to do, but I want to double check with you. What's your move
Yeah,
here?
I think you just have to block Regavan and then shrink DRC. You still don't want to take too much damage because DRC is going to naturally get Delirious again. But there honestly is some thought for Dom to just take, like, let's say 2 baubles from the yard here with Hearse and, go that way and force DRC to attack again next turn. And then you have this block available and just kind of take everything from Kovu, since Kovu went with the play of, attack with Regavan and kind of give that card away, which was interesting. We'll see what the follow up is.
Oh, check this out. Dom decides to cut the Dragon's Rage Channeler off of Delirium here, saying my life total is more important in case you play something that I cannot handle here on this uh, tense board state. I'd rather just give myself the potential for another draw step here, and that draw step is another copy of Grief.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so now the race begins since it's only 1 damage coming through with DRC. Just trying to get Grief in there and get Hurst as boosted up as possible. And then if Dom were to top deck land 4, Grief, Crew, Unlicensed Hearse will actually, won't be lethal, but it will be a nice chunk of damage here.
All right, Dragon's Rage Channeler into the red zone here. Kovu, 2 cards in hand against Dom's 2 cards in hand. Dom going to activate Unlicensed Hearse, exiling Lightning Bolt and Ragavan. And yeah, I think the way this game is looking, okay, one of these cards is a Ledger Shredder, but Dom does seem somewhat favored in this board state just by virtue of having the biggest creature in play.
Yep, definitely advantage Dom here, able to attack with another Grief. And then next turn, you're able to crew up the Unlicensed Hearse. Even if you just pitch a card off Grief before it goes to the graveyard, then you can crew and put Kovu to the test here. And yeah, it's going to be a tough game to come back from.
Yeah, I feel like the 4th land here from Dom's side would just absolutely unlock, game-breaking plays. But to Kovu's luck, it's not there just yet. Undying Malice is annoying though, because you have to kill the Grief at some point, and it being able to just come back and get the ETB value is problematic to say the least.
Oh, for sure. Still getting aggressive here. This is interesting. Putting Dom down to 8, has to have a plan for this Grief, or is just hoping, all right, Dom, if you have another creature, I'm in trouble. But we will see, leading me to believe that maybe there's a counter spell available.
That makes sense, right? If we're not playing spell, well, we did tap out for the Ledger Shredder, but still, like, counterspell would be, it would explain just like drawing the turn, not playing a land, just saying go. There, that kind of play pattern is only really indicative of certain things.
All right,
I think
over to Dom's here, it looks like.
red card here would also probably be lethal as well.
Yeah, exactly. Depending on if there is a counter spell. Wow, Regavan off the top being excellent. Okay. Now, you don't want to trigger Shredder at all costs, so you want to try to deal with that first if you can. But yeah, having 2 pitch elementals here, both of which can crew this Hearse, which is a 6/6 here. I think okay, goes with the Fury first. Interesting. Okay,
Yeah, I
looking
think
to either find a counter spell or get Delirious.
I think I like the sequencing. If this gets counterspelled, then you just have lethal. In fact, now that I think about it, you're praying that there's a counterspell because then you have the game locked up.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, normally you want to lead with grief type of thing to be able to check their hand and then go for it. But I think just it's weird that the Fury is kind of the bait, even though it's going to destroy both of your opponent's creatures right now, which is quite impressive.
Yeah, and just to clarify on that, right? If we play the grief first, I guess we don't have to use the grief to crew the unlicensed hearse, but there's a
Yeah.
world where weird stuff happens, like I don't know,
Yeah,
double.
the one thing you get to look at though is you get to grief first and look at their hand, and then with the evoke trigger on the stack, then you can crew unlicensed hearse.
Right.
Ooh, dress down. Interesting. Yeah, looks like that's still not gonna do. Well, that actually kills Kovu on the spot since you automatically get to crew hearse.
So does the hearse have any power and toughness though?
I would think. I guess I have not seen this interaction, but I will. Oh wait, yeah, I guess not. Yeah, because it's a star star. Star stars, just like constructs, would die to dress down. So there might have been a better time to do this dress down, but I guess then you don't get to have Ledger Shredder stick around. All right, that was really interesting and a really nice play there from Kabu. The more I think about it, now Fury does stay in play. Now it does not go away, but it also does not activate the ability.
Which means now potentially we have top deck outs here because if we connive away a spell, we could just draw Bolt and that would be lethal. We'd go to a game. No, we wouldn't go to game 3 rather, because we are in game
Yeah.
2 and Murktide's up. Yeah, that would just be the match.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the one thing about that is now that Hearse is not getting in there, unlicensed Hearse can more than likely just take DRC off of Delirium. So
Okay.
would still probably need something like maybe Double Bolt or something. But yeah, either way, nice play there from Kova. The more I think about this play. Now, you could have waited until unlicensed Hearse got crewed, though, if I'm understanding that right. Maybe in 7 minutes with our delay, Twitch chat can well actually me and let me know how this would work, because I've not seen that interaction pop up, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a really good question too, because then the Fury would also, like, the evoke trigger would be on the stack already, and then it would
Yeah.
it would die as well. So we'll get confirmation, future Corey, future Anu, on how that ruling actually works, and yeah.
All right, and just plays the grief here as another blocker or just another attacker next turn. Puts Kobe down, and this is going to be the big turn. Now, if there's some way to not only maintain Delirium plus a lightning bolt, or something like that, it's all the players are in Kovu's court, since Dom is handless, and there's just one activation of Hearse, but that's really all that is available.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too is I think we've come to the point where Kovu just has too many, like, card types in the graveyard. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
see
getting there. I wonder how many it is. You have instant,
artifacts.
enchantment, land, sorcery, creature, so 5. So you can for sure take away Bobble and Dress Down. That takes away 2 types. Then you have creature, instant, sorcery, land. Okay, that doesn't work. Wow. Is there just 6 types?
I think so. Yeah, just one enchantment and one artifact. This is
But with all that being said, Kovu still just has to have a bolt.
yes, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that
So
is, yeah.
I kind of just give Murktide the benefit of the doubt. Like, when they need a bolt, they'll have the bolt. You know what I mean? I kind of just expect it to happen.
Absolutely.
But I suppose if that were the case, we would have been in the red zone like miles ago. So this is the rare instance where we don't have the lightning bolt, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. Or they're jumping up and down because they just top deck lightning bolt and they're going to give Dom Harvey, the reigning champ, his first loss.
Okay, it's Unholy Heat.
Okay, so the wrong red spell, but you do get more looks at this. Not only does DRC get to surveil, but you get to try to find a bolt, so you get kind of 2 more looks at the powerful 1-drop.
Interesting decision to go after the 3/2 here, as
Yeah.
opposed to, like, the Fury or even the tapped grief. I mean,
Yeah,
you've got flyers.
Yeah, land. I believe there's 6 types, right? Land,
I,
instant,
ca- Counting was
creature,
never my specialty. You're asking
artifact,
the wrong guy.
enchantment, sorcery. Yeah, there's 6 types. So
Okay.
your delirium is protected, which is impressive that it's protected after this unlicensed hearse has been on the battlefield for so long.
Oh, you know what? It's menace. Menace must have been the key word here, but
Yeah.
yeah, that might make some more sense. And Dom's gonna wrap up this one, so we are gonna go into game three. Rakdos Scam taking up the first post board game. Uh,
What a game.
yeah, I think honestly, like the sideboard cards and some of the play draw dynamic made a big difference. How do you feel about that Knight's Whisper?
Yeah, I mean, on the play it was excellent. I would imagine it comes out when Dom is on the draw, but who knows? I mean, fueling up your hand for 2 mana when this deck doesn't have a bunch of card draw outside of Fable and outside of Season Pyromancer seems decent. But yeah, that was just a really well played game by both players. Kavu with that dress down play as really one of the very few ways to keep him alive and to keep his creatures intact. So Mac, and I mean, gave himself like 5 looks maybe at a bolt there. So yeah, that was an impressive sequence there.
Yeah, I will also give props to Dom as well for just playing really tight
Oh,
there,
for sure.
understanding like, okay, dress down definitely changes like how this game is play out. Here's my 3/2 grief that is going to kill you because I've just overwhelmed you on the board. And again, like this is interesting, but I'm slowly starting to believe that Rakdos Scam's board presence is no joke. So like,
Oh yeah.
these red decks do have a cutout for them.
100% agree. And they're looking at Dom's hand on the draw now. So, but just another perfectly functional hand. You have the Delta for the red sorts. You got a plethora of 1 drops and 1 mana interactions. Snap keep for sure.
And thinking about what kind of opening cards you're looking for, maybe from the Murktide side of thing. Obviously, we know Dragon's Rage Channeler is good. Obviously, we know Ragavan is good. Is there anything else that you would want to see in the opening hand for the Murktide player?
A bunch of removal is usually pretty good. Lightning bolts on holy heats. You're pretty happy with that. Some mixture of all those things is pretty good. I don't Murktide game too much, so I'm wondering how many counter spells they leave in. But that's another card that's going to be a lot better on the play than it would be on the draw. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would suspect I'd hazard a guess counterspell not so good just by virtue of like if you think about mana like Magic as a game of mana, you're always going to be trading 2 mana for your counterspell. You're probably not always going to be getting 2 mana of your opponents. Like you'll probably counter like a 0 mana grief or like a 1 mana
yeah,
fatal push or like a things that you don't really want to trade down on mana for.
totally agree. And I mean, that is just the power of Modern Horizon being injected into the modern format. There's so many amazing, powerful things for 1 mana that cards like that end up being a little bit worse at 2 mana that only deal with one thing.
All right, so it looks like Kovu and a mulligan to 6 here. Steam Vents shock you down to 18. Do we have a turn 1 creature to put into play? We'll find out shortly. Dom's hand looks pretty good, though. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Thoughtseize, and Fatal Push. Just a
Mhm.
great mix of defense and offense.
Yeah, it's a tough choice. Do you want to try to be proactive, but then if your opponent has a hand disruption spells, it gets worse? I love starting out Thoughtseize and not Regavan though, because they either have Consider or they have a red spell,
Mm-hmm.
and there's really no in between. So there we see an amalgam of both players' hand, and we can go a little bit of process of elimination. What we have, there's a counter spell, expressive iteration. Yeah, we'll see revealed hand. We'll see if our director can keep up on that. We appreciate you, Adrian.
Yep, and then to round it out, Dragon's Rage Channeler, the Consider, and the Basic Island. I cannot imagine any of those cards are in the Rakdos Scam deck list. So
The
let me
true
ask you
scam,
this.
adding
Yeah.
islands. Yeah.
What do you take? Okay, so Dom took the counter spell. Do you agree with that decision?
I think Fable the Mirrorbreaker is probably Dom's best card or pretty close to Regavan. So I think that makes a lot of sense. As it stands, wow. You know what really stands out to me? Oh wait, okay, we did have the Consider. I was like, did Kovu just keep a hand with no 1 mana interaction? I didn't see the Consider right away. I was like, impressive. Just bluffed the 1 mana removal spell for a Regavan. But now we're gonna see Consider, and the hand's gonna be opened up a bit.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting. I mean, kind of forced to cast it here. Honestly, this does make me happy though. I do like the kind of respect that Dom gave to the potential of like a lightning bolt or an unholy heat on the Ragavan, and kind of also what I suspect is the power of this Rakdos deck is when you get to combine cheap discard alongside these really game-ending snowbally threats like the monkey, like the Fable, so on.
Yep, totally agree with you. Consider here to try to find some action. But pretty weak hand with the mulligan and the Thoughtseize. It sucks to mulligan against these Rakdos scam decks just because, well, you know, any kind of time you mulligan, those mulligans get really compounded every single time that they have the Thoughtseize or they have the grief and fraying death and that kind of stuff ends up being really strong.
Yeah, consider going to not surveil anything into the graveyard. It looks like Ledger Shredder is the follow-up here off of the basic island that we saw earlier. And now it's Dom's turn to make a move here. Dothi Voidwalker the draw for Dom.
Okay, so plenty of options. Can go Ragavan to start, but I like Fatal Pushing Shredder. Just get that off there. It's kind of the main thing they have going on. And yeah, I think it might be a Ragavan time and try to protect it, even though Dom doesn't have any way to force it through yet.
So this is an interesting question, right? Do you, if you were in Dom's position, do you just hold the Ragavan to maybe like dash it the next turn and hold up Feign Death to keep to bring the Ragavan back, or do you agree with this line? Just like use my mana, play my spells, don't get cute.
With knowing the cards that Dom knows, which is DRC and Expressive Iteration, I'm for sure jamming because, well, Kovu is probably just going to Expressive Iteration and try to find some other land, another red source to block with DRC, and then you go from there. And if Ragavan gets dealt with, you probably have Fable the Mirror Breaker as an option. So, yeah, I like just using your mana, being as proactive as possible here from Dom's position.
All right, that makes sense. So we'll see if Kovu has a way to handle this card. Instead, what is it? Okay. Perhaps, I mean, well, definitely, I would say Expressive Iteration is a sign of weakness in my mind that we just don't have the removal spell immediately. I think if we did have the removal spell, we would just slam dunk removal spell right here, right now on the Ragavan. Take no risk, no
Probably, yeah.
chances.
Probably, but instead fires this off. More than likely to find a land too, but did find Unholy Heat, so gets paid off and gets to kill Ragavan here.
Yeah, and this game is surprisingly back and forth now. Like the only card we know now in Kovu's hand is the Dragon's Rage Channeler, as the Expressive Iteration was just cast this turn. But the good news is Dom's not out of gas just yet. Takenuma gonna come into play here, followed up by the Fable. You get your Goblin Shaman, and now you get to do some work.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting that resolved is huge. Now we'll see what kind of follow up. But yeah, every time you think, well, Dom's pulling far ahead, and then Expressive Iteration gets cast, and you're like, well, that card's messed up. So that makes sense.
It's kind of interesting too because the turn one Thoughtseize has really caused Kovu to stumble significantly enough to the point where Dom's actually just been able to like confidently tap out every turn, deploying one threat after another after another. A lot of pressure here from Dom's side. So I think this is a really good question actually. In this matchup, who is the beatdown?
I would think it's the scam deck. Basically, the scam deck takes priority in most of the matchups, but it is pretty close.
Okay, yeah, I would suspect so as well. I think it has to just do with the fact that the scam deck doesn't have a great way to interact with flyers outside of like maybe terminate. You'd have to bring in cards like unlicensed first, but inherently the natural plan is not quite there to sort of outgrow or out control the blue red deck. So I think I definitely agree with you here. And then Dragon's Rage Channeler in play here. Bobble Trigger now on the stack. And we're going to see what the second chapter of the Fable Saga yields for Dom. Is there anything here you would discard from Dom's hand?
God, it's close. I think probably the Feign Death. I think that would be important to get rid of, but it's close. It's close. You do want to protect your stuff a little bit here, but you gotta find removals. So I think that's what I'd get rid of right away.
All right, well, plot twist. What if I told you that your top card is Fury now? How does that change the calculus at
I
all?
think that changes it a little bit. Now the whole Fury, and then use the first trigger to kill Ledger Shredder, make sure that's dead, and then Feign Death here is excellent. So nice pick up there from Dom.
Oh wow! And check this out. That's terrifying. I mean, you've probably been on this side of the table many times to realize, but like when your opponent denies the discard trigger and they have like a handful of spells, you're just like, oh no, not like this.
Not like this.
Okay, well, Fury gonna come into play, exiling Seasoned Pyromancer. If this combo goes through, I have to say Dom is beyond a heavy favorite to win the match.
Yeah, this is looking really good, especially with one card left. But man, the start of this turn, this was not looking great. If just looking at the board state. So really impressive stuff here so far. And there is the Feign Death.
Oh, and we have the Unholy Heat.
Okay, that's big. Still dealt with the Shredder, which is the main thing, but
all right, so yeah, this is one of the reasons why the combo, quote unquote, the scam, quote unquote, may not necessarily be the best in this matchup, is because your opponent has so much interaction. We're gonna see Dauthi Voidwalker come into play here, and I feel like maybe Dom got a little bit punished here for the over aggression. Would you have made the same play regardless? Just say like, hey, you have to have it. You got one card in hand. It has to be it.
100%. Yep.
Okay.
Definitely would have done it. If it is that, sure, you kind of got me. But even so, like the Fury dealing with the Shredder was the main thing you needed. I'm still favored here. But it is still very close. You can't really attack with the Shaman. But yeah, a little brutal.
Yeah, I suppose you do have a 2-turn clock, a little bit more than a 2-turn clock, because the Fable has to flip, then, pass a turn after that, and then you can start copying the Dauthi Voidwalker to give yourself 2 unblockable threats.
Yeah, that's excellent. If you can ever line it up where you do it at end step, and then, especially if you do it in response to a spell, then that Dauthi Voidwalker, instead of dying, you can just sacrifice it and cast a spell off it too. That's pretty cute interaction with Reflection.
Oh, yeah.
But here comes the pain. And DRC had to attack, so Kovu could have easily drawn a land and, doesn't have anything going on here and is going to need a big draw step now. Once again, the biggest one being Expressive Iteration.
Yeah, it's funny because I think now we're at the point where Murktide Regent is actually just not the out. You lose if you draw Murktide.
Yeah, yep, you lose on the spot. Okay, we did have a bolt, and is this going bolt face?
I
Maybe I wouldn't imagine because at the Voidwalker, but has the Malice here. So it's probably gonna let this Surveil resolve and then Malice it away. And then you gotta think it's gonna be pretty near impossible. Even Expressive Iteration into double bolt. That's kind of the line where we'd be at. You need exactly that.
Yeah, one of these players is Bane and the other is Batman. I'll let you decide who's who.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, so brings that back as a 4-3. We might see one more draw step.
It's got to be really good. It's okay. All right.
Expressive Iteration. It's always Expressive Iteration here. But Spirebluff Canal entering exile. That's going to be pretty brutal. The other one's got to be Bolt on Voidwalker just to have a chance here, it looks like.
Yep, agree. Mm-hmm.
Or Unholy Heat, of course, will do it as well.
Okay, another Dragon's Edge Channeler. That should
Nope, that won't do it. Because you can just Reflection the Dauthi, and that's 7 shadow damage coming in. That's going to be Dom moving to 3-0.
Rulings question, Corey.
Yeah.
Does the Voidwalker come in with a counter on it?
It does not. Nope, it copies the actual card. But that one's already got a counter, so that's really all you need. and can shrink these down more than likely. There's the copy. Yeah, I thought Spire Bluff Canal was the other one that got exiled, but there is a card in hand, so I guess maybe we didn't see that right. Huh.
I thought so too, but either way,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah, that's
Dom's
gonna do it.
Dom's
Alright.
got the 3-0, yeah.
Dom's got the 3-0. Impressive work here from our reigning champion here, who took down the December, end of the year season tournament not too long ago. That was the last one we did, and that was a really long match. So